Welcome everyone to our 2020 Customer Success Planning webinar. We're really excited that so many of you could join us today, and we're excited about this format, which is a bit different for us here at ChurnZero. Get to share the expertise of some other people in the customer success space with us. My name is Abby Hammer, and I am the Chief Customer Officer at ChurnZero. And I'm delighted to be joined today by three leaders from ChurnZero customers who have come today to hash out lots of thoughts around finishing 2019 strong and then getting into 2020 and making the most of it with your customer success teams. So we want to spend most of the time talking about that good stuff, but we do want to do some introductions so you can put faces and names together. So we'll go ahead and get started there. Danielle, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Danielle Middlebrook. I am the Senior Director of CS at Sendoso. And the primary goal at Sendoso is to enable businesses everywhere to make more human connections in a digital world. So we realize that companies today are drowning in a lot of digital noise and that businesses are having trouble cutting through that noise to make meaningful relationships. And so what we do at Sendoso is that we do direct mail. It's very much what's old is new again. We know that direct mail is a very effective way to create those personalized connections with people. So what we do at Sendoso is allow you to operationalize that. We know that direct mail is hard to scale, so we scale it for you. We operationalize it, we scale it, we track your sending. And so that you can send everything to prospects and customers, just about anything from company branded items to e-gifts to perishables like plants and cookies, and we'll even handwrite your notes for you. So I have been leading the CS team for about a year now. We are under rocket ship growth. When I started, there were just a handful of CSMs. Now we have about 25 team members in our CS org. And I am really excited to talk to you today about year-end planning as we prep to wrap up my first fiscal year here at Sendoso.
Love it. Perfect. Thank you. Antoinette, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Antoinette Abood, and I'm the Director of Customer Success at Levelset. At Levelset, we empower people to get what they earn in the construction industry. So there's a visibility problem in construction, and we work to help people talk it out to avoid any payment problems and exchange easy paperwork through our platform. I've been with Levelset for almost 5 years now, working on the CS team and leading CSMs in some capacity for almost that entire time. We are growing fast. We've kind of expanded our CS org in the last year, and for our CSMs in particular, we'll probably be doubling that team in the next year. So it's a really exciting time for us, and really happy to be here, and looking forward to chatting with everyone.
Awesome, awesome. And last but certainly not least, Geeta, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Geeta Aurora. I head up the customer success team at LeagueApps. LeagueApps is a payments registration, scheduling, and communication platform for sports organizers. So we work with youth organizations that run club programs, but we also work with the adult rec space that does a lot of programming for corporations in different cities. I have been here for almost a year and a half, so getting ready to go into my second planning cycle at LeagueApps. We are also on a pretty aggressive growth trajectory, so expect to see more headcount on our team, but we actually just finished our first ever youth sports conference yesterday, which I think is the first of its kind in the industry, and so we are not just talking about how we're planning for 2020, but how we can leverage the energy and enthusiasm that we have coming out of that to propel and potentially accelerate our plans for next year.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for joining us after such a big event. I know that, I'm sure that took a lot out of you and your team. All right, well, let's go ahead and kick off some topics for today, guys. I want to talk a bit about end of year planning and preparation, and then really spend a lot of time focusing on 2020. So I know the four of us were chatting before we got going, and Antoinette sort of brought us all into the reality that we have 36 days left in 2019, business days left in 2019, if you take out the weekends and take out the holidays. So we've got a limited amount of time to work with, and I want to talk about how we can close out 2019 on a really strong foot. And I want to sort of break it into two parts of the conversation if we can. Let's talk about what we do with our customers, and then maybe let's talk a bit about how we get our team organized to finish the end of the year strong. So going with customers first, as we look at the end of the year, and our customers are often having the same sorts of discussions we are, how do we make sure they're prepped for the end of the year? What are you guys doing to help customers set goals for next year? How are you sharing recommendations with them? So what are the outreaches that you're working on with your customers right now? And I won't pick someone to start, so we'll go with whoever's got the best idea out of the gate, and then we can keep going from there.
I can start. At Sendoso, like I said, we're a sending platform, so the end of the year is by far our busiest time. We are busier than ever at sending direct mail during the holidays, and it also tends to be our highest sales quarter, and therefore it's also our highest renewal quarter. So it is busy on all fronts. And on top of that, we're trying to squeeze about 3 months of work into 2 as people step away from the office to enjoy time with their families. So when you have as much going on at the end of the year as we do, prepping our customers has to start with prepping our team. So before Q4 even begins, we start to coordinate with sales leadership to get their forecast so that we can set hiring plans for the quarter. We start reaching out to our Q4 renewal customers just to prep them for the terms and signature. In customer marketing, we start to build out our one-to-many outreach cadences, which are largely focused on sending timelines and deadlines, tips and tricks for what to send, countdowns to holiday sending. We just know that it's a really busy time for everyone. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that that we're doing everything for our customers to ease that burden and stress of holiday sending and closing out the year.
And Antoinette, I know this is also a really busy time of the year for your team. So what are you doing to try to get your customers organized for the end of the year?
Yeah, it's, we have the same thing where a lot of our customers start going on their vacations pretty early. It can be really hard to get in touch with them. So we sort of have a rallying cry in our office in Q3 where it's like, get people on the phone now, start getting them to commit to some times later on. So we have the touch points already baked into our regular cadence at the end of the year. And then we try to host things that are just very value driven. One of the most important things for our customers is them closing out 2019 in a good financial place. So they have all of these open invoices, all this open AR. How are they going to close that at the end of the year? So one of the things that we're also doing, in addition to those pre-baked kind of milestones and touch points in the journey, would be a similar style panel to this, but with our customers and asking them, what are they doing to collect on those invoices that have been outstanding for over 90 days and kind of get them more engaged, because that social proof is really what's going to get them in the door. They hear from us a lot, so it's great to have them hear from our other customers as well and other experts in the area. So we try to do that. We do use in-app announcements as well as email to target our customers. We save our big mailing for the year for Mardi Gras, since we're located in New Orleans. So we start prepping for that this time of year as well, because it's a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah, gotta get ready there. For the two of you, Geeta, I know things are a little different for you, so I want to come to you in a second, but for Danielle and Antoinette, have you guys done anything that's been effective in terms of those renewals that are right at the end of the year and prepping those customers at the end of the year? Have you done anything that's been effective to accelerate those conversations, make sure they're not happening in those last couple of days of the year when people might be out and your team might be out? Anything that's been effective at getting people to pick up the conversation earlier?
We actually, and side plug for ChurnZero, we use the ChurnZero plays to start talking about the renewals 2 months out. And we're actually getting a renewal sentiment that we're logging in Salesforce right now, but that renewal sentiment lets us know where we really need to focus a push. If somebody is thinking about not renewing, we know that 2 months out, so we know how to target, how to focus that, and we're not saving our efforts for the last few weeks when we know that nobody is going to pick up that phone. So we already bake that in a little bit earlier in the process.
Okay, good. What about you guys, Danielle?
We do something similar, and it was really just a look at what we had in our pipeline for Q4. We started looking at that very early in Q3 and realized that we needed to get started now. So we started priming our conversations with customers for those renewal conversations. And it's something that we've actually built into the life cycle very early on. We start talking about renewal at about the 6-month mark. And in some cases, we have really candid conversations with customers at that time to say, if you were going to renew tomorrow, would you? Yes or no? And that creates a really compelling conversation. It gives us an opportunity to either expand on what's working or to pivot, to update our strategy, to remove any friction points that might exist for any reason, and really set us in good shape for the renewal when it comes to that 3-month mark, 2-month mark, and then the countdown is nearing from there.
Awesome. So Geeta, I want to bring you into the conversation here because I'm sure some people are like you, where Q4 is actually a little bit quieter for you guys. It's not your busiest time of year. You still have to do all of the end of year prepping. So how does the end of the year look a little different? And as a group that doesn't need to be worried about sort of the chaos of the end of the year, how do you approach the end of the year?
Yeah, we actually kind of use the playbook that we have during our busiest time and extend it. So for us, we do a lot in the summer months, and we actually hit some busy times as well in the start of the year. So we tend to have a lot of customers who do multiple rounds of programming a year, and for us, it's getting about ahead of that. So the renewal concept applies, but it's a little bit different in the sense that it's not the contract per se, or the seats or the licenses. It's like, okay, when is their next set of programming and what are we going to do about it? So from a customer perspective, we tend to look 60 days out regardless of time of year. We've, similar I think to what Danielle and Antoinette have said, getting ahead of it allows you to at least get in touch with the customer and understand what they're going to need when, so you're not scrambling as much. And we use that as kind of an ongoing cadence. And then beyond that, as I mentioned, we actually just did this conference because it's a little bit of a quieter time for us. Q4 tends to be a great opportunity to engage with our customers live, which we don't get to do very often during the year. And it also propels us into what is convention season, which you would not think that exists in youth sports, but it does. Each sport has their own thing going on. And so we use a lot of our time to prepare for that, because that's when we can actually get in front of people live. So we use the combination of activities that are happening in the industry, which happen to be consolidated in Q4 for us, to prep and kind of propel us as a launching pad into the new year. And we're combining that with some basic housekeeping on our side, which is to take a look back at what's worked well in 2019 and say, okay, how do we want to adjust and change that in terms of our overall customer engagement strategy and approach going into 2020.
Perfect. And actually, that's a great segue for us to start talking a little bit about what's gone into your 2020 planning, or what is currently going into your 2020 planning. So let's talk about how we are going to use, the current year to inform what happens next year. And again, I think it comes in two flavors. How do we understand what's happening with our customers themselves? And then how does that influence what we do with our teams and how we change, team structure and comp and anything else like that, So let's talk first about how we analyze customer health. I'm curious about how each of you go about that process, who you involve in it, what kind of data points you're looking at. I know that's a pretty broad topic, so we'll maybe start with how you approach looking at the past year, and then we can follow up on some specific questions.
Sure.
Start with this one.
Yeah, go ahead, Geeta.
Well, thank you, Danielle. For us, it builds off of kind of what we were already talking about a little bit. So one of our quarterly processes that we've introduced is to actually do portfolio reviews with each of the CSMs to make sure we have a good gauge on where they think the portfolio is. And we actually are cross-referencing that with ChurnZero, because we're a little bit new in terms of our use of the platform, to see if the data supports the assessment that the individuals are giving us. And for us, that's a little bit of a change than what we've done in the past, just because we haven't had the platform before. But being a bit more data-driven and understanding what's happening with our customers is a really important element for us and how we're adjusting things going into next year. So I'd say for us, it's a little bit of what do we know about the customer? What have been the touch points that we've had? How recently have we engaged with them? Have we seen any red flags in terms of what their ongoing model looks like with us? And then how does the data support what we believe is happening? And using the combination of those things gears me up to say, okay, what can we reasonably support and manage with the staffing that I have? What are the other inputs I'm going to get from other parts of the company, either in terms of sales pipeline and how that's going to grow, what it means from a product perspective, because if we're launching new services or elements to our platform, we have to be able to support that, and how volume continues to shift on the support side of things, as well as we bring more customers onto the platform so we can account for that appropriately.
Awesome. Let's go around the horn and talk about how everybody's sort of approaching the topic, and then I'll dig into some specific questions. So Antoinette, why don't we shift to you? How do you guys go and look at the last year to inform what you do next year?
Yeah, so we're always looking at that data. We don't necessarily wait until the end of the year. We will make pivots and adjustments throughout the year based off of churn and upsell and what that net churn is looking like. So our focus is always on bringing in that expansion revenue. So we're looking at health all the time. We started off manually creating our health scores in a Google Doc when it was my first week at Levelset that I did that. And we've learned a lot since then. And we are pretty data driven right now in evaluating the opportunity pipeline for our CSMs. And we are actually part of the revenue team as CS. So we have a really close relationship with our sales managers as well. So we work with them very closely when we're noticing trends with customers and maybe red flags early on, or helping them better identify who our most successful customers are going to be, and constantly tying that back so it's not just customer handoff and done. So the metrics are constantly being looked at. We have kind of monthly KPIs that we're going to address if we notice we're not hitting them, or our customers aren't meeting that target, then we're going to look back at it.
Okay, fair enough. Danielle, let's hear a bit about how your team approaches it.
I think we're all taking a very similar approach in that we're looking at the data, trying to figure out what indicators there are with the data to help us be anticipatory and to help us forecast where we are going to be in the future. One of the interesting things about Sendoso is that we have changed so rapidly in our rapid growth that although it is very important to take a look back and look at things like churn reasons, some of it can feel a little time capsule-esque. So we can certainly learn from it, but we have to spend a little more time peeling apart which of those elements apply today and which of them are a bit antiquated, and what can we apply to our planning for the future. So I would say that I spend more time looking at health indicators, and because those are still very applicable today, no matter how we've grown and changed as an organization. So I spend a lot of time looking at health indicators and what are the common factors that make customers stay. Things like usage metrics, which we all know are important in SaaS models. That is the metric that we use to show health and ROI. But what's the inflection point for that? Like, how sticky is sticky enough to really drive renewal and retention? So we spend time looking at that, and we also look at what verticals or teams may retain at higher rates, and again, what churn factors from the past are still going to be relevant in our business today, and what are our opportunities to learn and affect change in those areas. So once that analysis is complete, then we reevaluate our approach to make sure that it's still in line, and that our goals and our associated metrics and our ChurnZero alerts are all properly aligned and calibrated to maximize that success and retention in the coming year.
Gotcha. So question for all of you. So we've all used the royal we as we've been describing these things. Who's actually involved in that process, and not just within the CS team. I'm interested in how you guys do or do not involve your actual team members in the process, but then also what other teams. I've heard a little bit about, we got to touch with support a little bit, we got to talk to sales a bit. let's dig into who you need to connect with and what the best way to share that information is. So maybe dive into a little bit more on the we part and then how you share the information as well.
I can
start. Oh, yeah, go for it. Perfect.
Sure. So I mentioned a little bit previously that customer success is part of the revenue team, since we are tied very closely to revenue goals with expansion revenue and then obviously the retention side of things. So we've really worked on building that revenue management muscle. So not only is it the CS team leaders, so person leading the CSMs, leading our support team, our training and onboarding team, but also those sales managers, our sales enablement team. We're all getting together to look at the numbers. So we are looking at what's relevant from the last month, what's relevant moving forward, what, is it a pricing change that's coming up that we're going to be working with, and how do we deal with that? So we'll work really closely with them on those types of things. Like an example more recently is we revamped a non-activation workflow for customers who weren't activating as quickly as we thought that they should, or as we typically see with our most successful customer base. And we pulled in the sales team and the sales managers to work with our CSMs and our education experts, which are the training and onboarding team. So we'll loop people in, and then trickling down to the front lines, we're constantly getting that feedback. When we need to move quickly and it's much bigger picture, it's going to mostly be leadership looking at the data, looking at the numbers, and then getting some input from the team on the actual execution and what their experiences on the front line are telling them.
And do you approach that just sort of in, hey team, here's what we want to accomplish, what are your thoughts to do that? Do you give them specific asks? What does that look like for you guys?
One of the things that I always like to do, and when I was specifically only leading the CSMs instead of just the whole org, I would put the numbers in front of them too. It would be like, hey guys, we're getting a lot of voicemails for this touch point at this point in the journey. What's your solution? So we have our core values as an entire Levelset company, but we also have CS core values that lead up into that. And one of those is to bring proposals over problems. And so I find that a really good approach to get the team involved is to bring the problem to them, give some potential options, and see what other creative juices there are for that, or find the source of the problem that way. So we'll put it up on a screen, we'll take a look at the numbers and ask for their feedback.
Awesome. I like the collaborative approach. Danielle, Geeta, what does it look like at your all's organizations? Give me a little bit of a peek behind the curtains.
I think that my team members and the people that are managing our customers and making sure that they have great experiences play the most pivotal role imaginable in this process. Because they create the data set that lives outside of the product and is overlaid with the product in order to provide a complete picture of customer experience. So I often tell my team that while we have many, many responsibilities to uphold with our customers, the most important responsibility that we have internally is to document our customers' experiences and journeys so that it can be digested by our internal teams and they can make smart and informed decisions that guarantee that our customers are always the driving force. So that's a hugely important role that they play. On top of that, they also play a pivotal role in creating and testing new alerts, managing. They are the ones that set the customer sentiment and their renewal forecasting, and they really serve up customer signals, whether that's sentiment, propensity to renew, feature sets, etc., before they even become data sets. So I've been thinking a lot recently about what those signals are, and that we have the benefit as a team, as a customer-facing team that is constantly talking to customers and deeply understands our customers, to serve up those signals before it's this happened this many times and do we need to address it at this level.
Awesome. Geeta, what do you have things you can add from your perspective?
Yeah, for us, the team really extends kind of company-wide, right? Our finance and data department leads our planning process, and everything inputs into it. So we are, when I mentioned the proverbial we, it is all of my colleagues as well as my team as well as their teams, because in some way, shape, or form, everybody kind of has an impact, right? If you have a sales rep who thinks that they're going to achieve a target of X and that's what we're putting into the plan, that all funnels down. But if that sales rep is like, there's no way I can do that, and here are the 5 reasons why, which links back to sales and marketing, that also has an impact. So for us, a lot of it tends to be a little bit more like exec team driven, in the sense of like the hard data part, because we use our planning process to also kind of translate into our budget for the subsequent year. So we have to understand headcount and areas of focus and strategic priorities in order to help set that vision for the business. But then within the customer success department in particular, I work with my team to provide a lot of the key inputs into that, for us to say, well, here's what we're going to achieve and how we're going to do it based on the inputs that I'm getting from my colleagues and my peers. So the way that we tend to think about it, or I tend to think about it a little bit more, is that our team sets the tone for what we think we can do, and when we're getting ready to commit to specific targets or objectives or goals, we'll have a conversation about that as a team to say, okay, do we believe we can do this? And there's usually always a little bit of stretch in there, which is right. But then if we're committed to our part of that equation, it's also then making sure we understand how that fits in to what's happening company-wide, because ultimately we lead in a very important part of that, but our colleagues do too. And so we want to make sure that it all fits together in a way that makes sense to drive the right customer experience, the right customer journey, and ultimately the right business goals.
Absolutely, absolutely. That actually blends well into, so once we have this understanding around where our customers are at and what we think we might need to change in the coming year, I'm interested on how we go about doing an audit on things like KPIs that you pump your team on, and processes that you're running, and how you make sure that you're making those changes in a way that's consumable by the team, particularly if you're making some of those changes towards the end of the year when there is a lot of noise. So talk to me about how you guys have looked at some of those key drivers for your team and made those changes.
For me, I think that you have to start with your top line North Star goals. So we ask those kinds of like, why are we really here sorts of existential questions, and set our goals based on those. I think once you have clear answers to those questions, you can organize around them to make sure that all your metrics and KPIs are aligned accordingly to drive those goals. And for CS at Sendoso, we are here to retain. It's the reason that we do everything that we do, from onboarding to lifecycle management to renewal management. It's all designed to drive retention, and we know that we have to have really happy, outcome-driven customers in order to do that. So when we're talking about KPIs and metrics, everything has to line up to that. It has to be, I tell my team often, when we are moving through plays, alerts, etc. in ChurnZero, everything that you get should feel like a gift, because it helps give you valuable insight into your portfolios, and it helps you meet your goals, which are retention and platform spend in Sendoso's case.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Antoinette, I think you maybe had a thought around that. I saw your voice start to go.
So we have a very similar kind of structure where we start with that North Star metric for the company, and everything sort of trickles down from there. Everything's tied very much to how do we get to that North Star metric. CS specifically, we're always focusing on creating raving fans. So people who want to use us religiously on all of their jobs, people who are willing to pay full price, and people who want to have all of their contacts using us as well. So that concept of virality. So all of our KPIs for all of our CS teams are really wrapped around customer engagement, customer happiness, getting that NPS score up, or the 5-star reviews. So it really depends on the team. And I mentioned earlier, we're evaluating those KPIs monthly. I don't think we try to make a lot of changes at the end of the year. I think that can sometimes be really stressful. for the team. If anything, we sort of refocus it and cancel out the noise. It's like, it's a conversation. What's the roadblock right now? Like maybe we're coming off of a bad month or a good month. What went well in that good month? What was the big roadblock? Let's try removing it. Is it something we need to focus on right now? Let's double down on the best KPIs, the best indicators we have. And one of the things that we also do in addition to the KPIs is we set habits that get you there. When we first did it, it was a little bit of magical guessing as to what would lead to that output, but we've gotten a lot better at that over time, looking back, reevaluating, fine-tuning it, so everybody knows what they need to do, and now is the time to just double down on execution.
Geeta, we've been talking about KPIs here, and I think some of us probably share a lot of similar KPIs, retention goals, maybe some NPS indicators of customer health. Anything that you guys are doing or that you've done, at other organizations or seen other organizations do you think sort of brings something different to KPIs that maybe we haven't thought about? I know I'm putting you a little on the spot with that one because it's not a question we've talked about before, but any ideas for us?
I would say for us at LeagueApps, we basically are, from a CS perspective, kind of handle everything post-sale. So we think it's not just about the retention piece, but it's about the activation, because if you don't get them implemented the right way, there's nothing to retain. And then we talk about retention and then the growth. So the last two parts of that I think are pretty standard, but also being focused on getting people set up the right way. That actually became the first part of our North Star when I first joined the company. And the way that we think about the journey is, if you don't get people set up the right way and engaged in the platform early, getting the latter two parts of that becomes much more difficult, because you have to usually then dug yourself a little bit of a hole that you have to get back out of. And it's, you guys all know, right? It's really hard to dig out of the hole once the hole is there. It's like you're clawing to get back up, and sometimes it just may not work out exactly. So we really take a focus on that element and piece of it as well. And I would say, just to kind of add a different lens to it, when I had first started, we weren't sure exactly what our KPIs were. I had heard a whole bunch of different things kind of floating around the organization. And when we sat down and said, well, what really is our North Star? Because Danielle, I think that's exactly right. You have to know what you're working towards. And if it is about like growing your base, retaining and growing your base, it's like, well, what are all the little things that you have to do? And are there other key metrics that contribute to even allowing you to get to that point? So that was kind of the lens that we took. And so now we talk about activation, retention, and growth. And I don't see that changing going into 2020. And now it's instead similar to what Antoinette said, the pivots on the margins. So I always pick like 2 or 3 things that I'm like, they're small enough that if I start to kind of seed them in and plant them in, the team will just more naturally start to get to doing them. But if I try and give everybody like 10 different things that are all major to absorb, there's no chance that we're going to be able to do that systematically. So it becomes a little bit more of a slow drip based upon the KPIs and the metrics that we're trying to drive as a company.
That's fair. That's fair. We talk a lot about change management with our customers, and I'm sure you guys do to a certain degree with your customers as well. It's just part of the CS conversation. So I think the trickle-in effect is really effective for that. In terms of change management, when you do make KPI changes or process changes at any point in the year, are there other practices that any of you have found effective? So certainly finding small spots to get into change, but have there been other things that have been effective for you all?
We are always looking for things that we have those top line KPIs, which are retention and platform spend, because that's the value on one side. Are they deriving value? And then is that value enough for them to retain and renew? In terms of, and it kind of goes back to your last question about kind of unique KPIs or metrics, we started talking recently about how to lock in our forecasts and really tighten them up. So there are some things that we can do on the getting ahead of Q4 renewals early, starting those conversations very early in the process, and kind of having those leading indicators for where we stand with an organization But my CS director came to me yesterday and he said, what do you feel like is an appropriate amount of shift in a forecast after it's been stated, whether it's with the CSMs or what we're seeing, and how do we make sure that we tighten that up? And so one of the things that we are thinking of propping up with the team is a forecast accuracy spiff. So it would just be, when we start out the quarter, where do you think you're going to land? And let's be real about that. And then how close do you come to that? And I think that it really forces more of an entrepreneurial spirit and really taking a deep dive, thinking very analytically about where things are in your portfolio, and then how close do you become to that target. And if you are really close to the target and you've illustrated that you have a deep understanding for that portfolio, then maybe we can provide you a spiff for that.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. That's a cool idea. Awesome. I want to shift our discussion a little bit towards actual operations planning for next year. So, how do we make sure we're getting the right resources in place, the right humans, the right technology, that sort of thing. So let's maybe start on the technology side a little bit. I know this group's a little distinct in the fact that you all have customer success technology, but what I think would be interesting for some of the folks today is to say, well, each of you pitched successfully to purchase customer success technology and then went forward and made a decision on that. Taking a step back and saying and making that business case for customer success technology. If someone's looking at doing that in 2020, what would be your advice to them on making a successful pitch for that?
I can start.
I did pitch ChurnZero, and it was something that was very newly implemented when I joined Sendoso, and I can say that it's one of the reasons that I'm here at Sendoso, because it was very clear to me that that investment had been made and that there was an investment in this team. So it was actually a recruiting trigger for me. I had used tools like this in the past. I know that they are a game changer in the way that we move about our work. I have been in CS long enough to remember the days where I was handed a multi-million-dollar book of business and told, make sure they don't leave. And that can be very challenging when you don't have the data that you need to really show you where your time and attention might be put to best use. So I was not willing to kind of go back in time and work in a state where I didn't have a tool like this to help me and my team be successful. So I knew that when I started talking to my CEO and my COO, whom I report to today, about how the team was propped up, even though it was a very small team, that investment had already been made, and that was very appealing to me as a candidate.
Interesting. Okay. I like that, from a growth perspective for customer success teams. I hope that becomes criteria for more leaders. Antoinette, I know you guys had to go through the process, so maybe take us a little through what that looked like for you and how you made the case for your exec team.
So we're really lucky here in that we started looking at CS software back in 2015. The problem wasn't getting buy-in from our executive teams. They have the executive team has always been willing and happy to invest in customer success, which is really wonderful to be a part of a team that's like that. We found a lot of great candidates back in 2015, but we would have been the thing standing in the way of success if we had actually gone forward with the software in 2015. We would have been paying money for a software that we weren't ready to use because we didn't have the data in the right places, couldn't make sense of all of the data. So it would have been, we would have churned at that point because we wouldn't have been using it correctly. We wouldn't have had the ability to use it correctly. So really the decision came when we got our house in order. We started off actually doing things very manually through Google spreadsheets, and then moved into Salesforce and tried to hack Salesforce. And then once we got the data in place and we found the different points that we wanted to monitor and track, and we knew exactly where to go for it, then we knew we were ready to make that commitment and make that investment. And it's definitely paid off. And I can say after going through the process that if we had tried to do it earlier, it wouldn't have been nearly as successful or fruitful.
No, that's fair. There is a certain degree of needing to have your ducks in a row, before you can successfully use software. Geeta, I'm interested in your perspective on this as well, and if there are other technologies or other resources you've had to pitch for your team, what has helped you make successful pitches?
Yeah, so our executive team and our board is generally supportive of technology if the argument exists for why you need it. And so for us, what it was about is, A, why is this the right time for us to introduce the technology that we're looking at? B, why are we then equipped to be able to use it in a way that's actually going to help us? And C, what's the incremental benefit that it creates based on what we want to do as an organization. And so we approached the case in that regard, right, which is similar to what Antoinette said. Like, we had gotten to a point where we had the information, so I was like, okay, if we can start bringing things together from a lot of different places, in the case of a CS platform, but aggregate it into a more holistic way that makes it easier for my team to consume, that's an easy argument because there's efficiency and value to be had for that. Then as we were exploring platforms and options, it was about, well, who's going to be able to meet our needs and help us drive results as a business? And also, like, what other efficiencies and benefits can I derive for my team? So one of the big values that I see in a lot of the technology platforms we have is either the ability to automate workflows and free up headspace and capacity for people to really focus in on customers, or to give them the right set of tools to allow them to do that, because that's what we do in customer success, right? You want to have as much time as possible to engage with the people that are driving your business, because that's not the thing that you can get from a software platform or anything else. And so we talked a lot about those different dimensions as I was making the case, and then also being able to justify and explain why the recommendation I was making for the platform that I wanted was the one for us to go with, because I've also had experiences with different tools and technologies, and it has to be able to make your life easier and also fit the size and life stage of your organization, but also be able to grow with you, and being able to kind of answer all of that for my team. So they're like, okay, we're going to give you the money to spend, but we know that you're going to be able to do something with it, not just in year 1, but years 2 and 3, became an important part of the conversation as well.
Awesome. So in addition to CS technology, a thing I hear more chatter around in the CS space is whether customer success operations should be a thing, and I think people look at marketing operations or sales operations and they go, well, we're clearly headed that direction. There's value in that. So curious in where each of you are at in terms of considering or implementing customer success operations, and if you're not there yet, what's going into your consideration of maybe adding, and if you are, how that's worked out for you so far. A taker on that first?
I can go. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's very relevant to conversations that we've been having for almost the past year with one of our senior CSMs who has a really strong interest in data. And, we have a sales operations, like a revenue operations manager, and we've worked really closely with them in the past. And I think that for us, as the team is growing and we're relying on CS technology for so much of what we do, there's so much importance on having the data being right. We all know bad data in, bad data out. And it's only an enablement tool if we're getting them the right information. So that CSM has been kind of on a tour to gather the tools and feel more comfortable with managing the different CS tech that we have, to be in that operations role. So we're actually by Q1 going to have our first CS operations person, and I think that it's going to be an incredibly valuable tool for our whole team, not just the CSM side of customer success, but for all of the different teams that we have under our umbrella. And I was jokingly asking our revenue operations guy, like, how do you know when you're ready? Which is, I think, a question that we all ask. And he said, if you're asking, it's too late. Like, you already need that role. So for us, I think it's a good time to have it, just to bring together all of the different tools that we're using and help with that reporting, making it more instant, helping with pipeline reviews for expansion revenue with the CSMs. Just it's right.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. Geeta, where are you guys at with maybe a discussion of CS ops?
So we actually made our first foray into an operations type of role on the team about 6-7 months ago. We had a really strong performer at the company who had a good slant towards that and was looking for a new opportunity. And I was like, great, let's try it. And we went into it probably with not as much definition or clarity as one might want to have at that particular juncture, but it has been a game changer for us. And such a game changer, in fact, that as I think about 2020 planning, I'm like, okay, what are the other ops gaps that I need to fill in order to make sure everything goes well, and how do I staff and or put in headcount requests for those? So we're going to grow it out a little bit more going forward. And I think, for us, there's been a lot of different elements of value here. One is just having someone who can take the important pieces and execute against them and get you back what you need to put team members in places to be successful. But two, it gives us an opportunity to standardize and kind of set the place. So rather than having everybody run in different directions, it's a little bit more like, okay, yes, you have to put your slant on it and manage it appropriately for your customers, but there are kind of certain things that also need to come out in what you're doing, and we'll tell you what those are, so you at least have the rails to play, to kind of play within, versus being able to go in whatever direction you want, because otherwise people will do a lot of different things. And then the last thing that I'd say it's really done for us as a team is given us touch points into other parts of the company. And what I don't think I fully appreciated early on in my customer success days, but I very wholly appreciate now, is that customers are at the center of almost everything that a business does, right? Sales is about getting customers in the door. Marketing is about developing pipeline or communications for those prospects or customers. Product is building stuff that ultimately your customers want to buy or are going to use. Engineering then has to deliver against that. And so we have so much in common with other parts of the company that having the ops role, just to make sure the lines of communication are clear, the clarification that's required to deliver against those things cross-departmentally exists, has just been invaluable for us.
That's amazing. I like that both of you also approached the first foray into the role by promoting a team member who is inclined that way. That's actually how we approached it here as well. And I think it's such a cool way to get a first foot in the door with ops and also give an outstanding team member an opportunity to shine. I think that's very interesting. Danielle, what does CS ops look like or not look like for you guys yet?
CS ops here is a total game changer. We did hire externally, but it was a recommendation from my CS director. He had worked with this person in the past, and I would not have probably looked at her because of her experience had I not had this back channel recommendation. She was in product management, but where that relays to CS ops is that it was really her responsibility to peel apart processes, peel apart functionality, put it back together, make sure that things were running smoothly. I had a list of things that I wanted the CS ops person to work on when they came in the door, and I handed her that list as soon as she got here. So it was everything from scaling our internal processes in ops, creating dashboards and driving KPIs and metrics, creating one-to-many campaigns in partnership with our customer marketing manager, optimizing our ChurnZero scores, creating playbooks, new hire onboarding. It's a big role. So I wanted to make sure that there were some deliverables defined to focus on, so that as that scope creep inevitably comes in, she can kind of revisit what are these priorities and can I make sure that they're tied to these priorities. But I would say that my personal experience in getting a good ops person in-house for CS, I have felt like I've gotten 10 people. It really is an amplifier across the org when you have somebody focused on, especially as we scale so quickly, somebody that's focused on being operationally driven within the organization.
Awesome. So one last thing I want to talk about today, and I think, guys, the way we're going to approach this is we'll finish up our conversation today, and then we'll answer some of the Q&A and maybe a blog post format, because I think that'll help some people get some longer answers on some things they're asking. But one thing I want to discuss as a group and leave the rest of the audience with is, as we look at 2020 and we look at customer success, what do we think is going to happen to customer success in the next year? How do we think it's going to change? You know, when we're sitting here in another year saying, all right, now let's look at what happened in 2020 and talk about 2021. You know, what do you think are going to be the game changers in 2020? Danielle, actually, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, so I mean, has there ever been a better time to be in customer success? This is a really cool time to do what we do and focus where we focus. And what I love about how quickly this profession has expanded is that it's brought in a lot of people from other functions typically in technology, whether it's from the product side, analytics, operations, account management, consulting. All of these groups are starting to take a look at customer success and join the ranks of customer success. And what I love is that they're bringing all these fresh ideas and new perspectives into our industry. So I see a lot of that, you know, within the next year is how do we think really freshly about how we approach customers and getting them what they need when they need it. I think that there's going to continue to be a strong correlation between product and CS. I have a really tight-knit relationship with our product teams, and they're really interested in that frontline perspective and what our customers are saying so that they can iterate and make sure that when they're investing their R&D dollars, that those are all in mind with customer needs and wants. So I think that we'll continue to see sort of these hybrid roles between CS and product, and we even have some examples of that from within Sendoso. And then don't roll your eyes. This may not be in the next year, but I am super excited to see what we can do with some machine learning and AI. I think, you know, changing from those data sets to signals using machine learning is really interesting, because by the time you leverage data sets, maybe it's too late. So we can leverage machine learning so that CS can focus on those truly human elements of what we can do. I think that could be a really exciting time.
Nice. I'll have to second you, Danielle. If you ask me what I think is coming in 2020, I think the hybrid of CS and product is coming in 2020. Now that might be a little self-serving for me to say, given that I lead our customer success and product teams, but I think, you know, even if it isn't the same person leading it, which I don't think it has to be, just a really tight relationship between those two organizations, I think changes the game for both teams. So I agree with you on that one. Antoinette, what do you think is coming in 2020?
Yeah, I do agree. The closer kind of cross-functional relationships, for us, that's manifested in almost like pod structure, where you have these teams that are hyper-focused on this aspect of the customer journey. For us now, it's like that 30, 60, 90-day activation period where we're hyper-focused with product marketing to deliver that. So I do see a lot more of that kind of we're all customer success mindset coming into play, which is really exciting because we always like joked about it. We're all customer success, but we really are. You were mentioning earlier, every function touches the customer in some way. So it's really important to tie that back to the customer journey and impact and everything. So I see that coming, and I do also see, you know, a continued growth of the role in data in driving the decisions that we're making. Like, yes, eventually that will come with like the, you know, artificial intelligence, the AI, machine learning. But I think now people are starting to get better access to tools that can help them get the data into a digestible format quickly and make decisions quickly. And that CS ops role is going to become a lot bigger, a lot hotter. You're going to see those growing from just one role to bigger teams that are focused on one on enablement, one on training and hiring and recruiting. So I see that kind of growing out a lot more specifically within CS rather than just, sales enablement and that kind of stuff.
I like it. I like it. Geeta, what do you got for us? What do you think's coming in 2020?
Well, I agree with what both Antoinette and Danielle have said so far. Obviously, and just to layer on top of that, I would say I think people will continue to recognize more and more the value of the function of customer success, right? It's a little bit more nascent. I remember when I was getting hired at LeagueApps, they were like, well, should we get a VP or should we get a director? And I was like, well, it depends on what you want to achieve, and you can decide, and here's how I would fit into that, and here's how other people would fit into that, right? But, a lot of times I think historically, especially like tech organizations, take a real sales or product focus. And you hear often that they are initiating from one of those two lenses, and then the rest is kind of growing on top. Very rarely do you hear them say they start with a customer focus because you have to get the customers first. But what I've seen in my experience in the tech space is as you cross certain inflection points, you actually, CEOs and co-founders start to understand the value of their existing base more and how much more that can actually help drive the business versus the initial lens that they started with. And so it builds a lot on what both Danielle and Antoinette have said, but this idea of thinking about being a customer-focused organization versus sales-driven or product-driven, I think is a trend that will maybe slowly emerge, but continue to emerge over the next few years.
Yeah, it feels like a cliche, or maybe I say it too much and that's why it feels like a cliche, but we always say like customer success is not a department, it's a culture. It's no one team. Yes, there is a team who happens to be named that, but their ability to be effective is so influenced by the teams that sit around them and the leadership that sits above them, and whether everybody considers it part of their job to make customers happy. So I like all of those predictions. I agree with you on all of them. 2020 is going to be a pretty amazing year for customer success if even half of those things come true. So with that, we are almost at the hour. To those that put in questions, I want to say thank you. We are going to follow up and get some answers on those because I know we've kicked off a couple of interesting discussions here, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time and go ahead and close us out on time. Danielle, Antoinette, Geeta, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your time, sharing your expertise. We hope that this is a first of a bunch of series that we do in this format. So thank you for being first out of the gate.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.